Hello, friends. My name is Ihor Havryshchak. This is the traditional YouTube platform of Channel 24, live broadcast on our YouTube portal. Thursday evening, this means that our guest is a political scientist from the United States of America and former chief of staff of the Azerbaijani government, Ramiz Yunus. Mr. Yunus, hello. Thank you for the invitation. I am glad to see you in good health. I greet all our esteemed audience. Glory to Ukraine. I will immediately ask our viewers to be active, write, ask, like, share our conversation. Well, Mr. Yunus would like to divide our conversation into 3 such blocks. This is, of course, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the President of Ukraine. He will speak at the General Assembly in the United States. It is already known that he will speak on September 24th. Already in the White House, they officially said that they would meet with Biden on the 26th. And Trump said that he also allegedly wants to see Zelenskyy. Of course, let's remember the Middle East, where Lebanon is almost declaring war on Israel. You will tell us what this means. And, of course, the South Caucasus, because Antony Blinken called both Baku and Yerevan there, and I am also interested in the visit of an alleged opposition leader from Armenia to the so-called DPR. This also caused me a little shock. Let's take turns. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, USA, the plan of victory that he is carrying. What will Biden and the White House say? Allegedly, they say that they have already heard about it, know and think that it is a worker. This phrase was uttered by the ambassador of the United States of America to the United Nations. Then Miller, the press secretary of the State Department, repeated the same thing. And the general background regarding this plan for Zelenskyy's victory, as it is called, seems to be positive. And usually, whenever some type of political events, meetings, events take place, or something is announced, I mean such a presentation, there is always information support. But it is one thing for Ukraine to provide information support, yes, this is quite natural, because Ukraine is presenting it, and another thing is the response from those to whom it will be presented. And therefore, such a reciprocal, positive movement on the part of official structures and at a fairly high level is a very good moment that is definitely worth paying attention to. In addition, 3 people immediately announced a meeting with President Zelenskyy, that is, the current President Joe Biden, the current Vice President and current Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and the current Republican presidential candidate, former U.S. President Donald Trump. This has already been officially confirmed. It was confirmed that Joe Biden was the first to meet. Then Kamala Harris announced a meeting at the White House. Precisely, I emphasize, Biden is meeting with President Zelenskyy at the White House, not in New York. A meeting with Kamala Harris is also scheduled at the White House, that is, in Washington. And with Donald Trump, most likely, the meeting will be held in New York, already within the framework of the UN General Assembly, that is, where he will be. And as I understand it, Trump is still a resident of New York, and he has quite a lot of opportunities there at a high level in his residence, perhaps even in the same Trump Tower, to receive President Zelenskyy. And what all 3 officially confirmed, this was confirmed by the official side in the person of the press secretary of the President of Ukraine, and this was confirmed by American sources that all 3 meetings have been announced. This is a very good positive sign. This is the success of Ukrainian diplomacy, which was able to make the 2 teams, who are in a very unpleasant situation, in the context of the polarization of American society, understand the importance and significance of the Ukrainian topic in the American domestic political discourse, especially through the prism of the presidential campaign. They want to make the most of this, given that the positions of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are different, and specifically the Republicans mean the part that supports Donald Trump.
Учитывая, что разная позиция у демократической партии и у республиканской, конкретно у республиканской я имею в виду ту часть, которая поддерживает Дональда Трампа, потому что у республиканской партии
The Republican Party has a mixed stance on Ukraine, but a large number of prominent Republican Party figures, especially in the lower house of Congress and the Senate, are quite positive about Ukraine. Therefore, it is far from accidental that here in Washington, President Zelenskyy has already announced meetings with the leadership of Congress in both the lower and upper houses. This is all very correct. This is very good. In this situation, it is important not to get involved in political squabbles, but to make sure that, on the contrary, all of them, to one degree or another, work according to the narratives and agenda that are necessary for Ukraine today. And in this regard, it is President Zelenskyy's plan. It is more timely than ever and quite in a good favorable atmosphere, in terms of the fact that any negative reaction to this plan will be used by one side against each other. I just have no doubt about it. And, on the other hand, I understand that this plan cannot be so large, multi-volume, there should be only a few specific points. And, first of all, military technical support for Ukraine. Because if this is a plan for Ukraine's victory, then Ukraine's victory plan means that we have heard 1,000 times how Ukraine sees its victory. And I have never heard from President Zelenskyy or from other representatives of the military political leadership of Ukraine that the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine itself were questioned. Despite the fact that since 2014 Ukraine has been subjected to aggression and occupation, I mean Crimea, Donbas, and after the start of Russia's full-scale aggression for 2.5 years, some other territories of Ukraine were added to it. Therefore, I think that the emphasis of this plan for Ukraine's victory, first of all, is military technical support. This is the same public permission, and not just permission to bomb with long-range missiles deep into the territory of Russia, but also many other points that the Kremlin will have to take very seriously, so that there is no ambiguity. Because it was this very ambiguity that stretched this war for 2.5 years. There should already be specifics. And I would like to see for myself the reaction of both the official White House and the reaction of Kamala Harris separately, how different or harsher it will be from Joe Biden's, or whether she will just repeat one-to-one, like a tracing paper. We continue this line. It is also very important to see what Donald Trump will say on this topic, who in the current situation is in a difficult situation, because, of course, if he were asked, he would gladly not meet in this situation, because it is one thing to be silent on this topic, not to say anything, and another thing is when the president of the belligerent party arrives, he meets with you and makes a specific proposal. Moreover, it will also be released in the media. And it is no secret that President Zelenskyy is not a person who will remain silent if something is said there during this against the interests of national security, sovereignty, territorial integrity of Ukraine. And this will have a negative impact on, so to speak, the pre-election territories of the same Donald Trump, who used to talk a lot. Now recently he has been trying to keep silent on this topic, but he has given ahead his candidate for the European President J. Jevons, who is talking complete anti-Ukrainian nonsense on this topic, and does not hide it. But he can't say that to his head. The kid, he is 40 years old, no matter how much he understands big politics, was a random person, only recently appeared thanks to Trump. But everyone writes to him, and they probably work with him. And this is probably a line that corresponds to the line that Donald Trump is satisfied with today. That is, his vision of how he sees the Russian-Ukrainian war, this Middle East crisis, and everything else, everything that is happening on the planet. Because J.D. Vance, of course, is not an independent figure. This is a man who simply Trump chose to be a youth clone of Trump himself. Therefore, it is very important to see how this meeting will go and what accents will be made in the public sphere. I think Ukraine and the Ukrainian team led by President Zelenskyy should make the most of the speculation of the Ukrainian topic, both on the part of the administration. Therefore, it is very important to play out competently so that this cherry on the cake is announced, and that the official permission to use long-range missiles deep into the territory of Russia is presented in the context of protecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. I think that it was Ukraine that agreed on this issue with the Americans, so the information support of all this topic leads to this meeting. If this is not announced, it will be a big mistake on the part of the Democrats, because they can do it, and both Biden and Kamala Harris can earn significant dividends in this situation, since it is in the hands of the executive branch.
Большая ошибка со стороны демократов, потому что они могут это сделать, и Байден и Камала Харрис могут в этой ситуации заработать большие дивиденды, потому что это в руках у исполнительной власти.
The legislature has nothing to do with this, and presidential candidate Donald Trump has no leverage either. Therefore, this decision can strengthen, because on the Middle East front, as we can see, the current administration has not yet achieved significant success. The fact that you have outlined the 3 blocks of today's conversation in this way is the right approach. In principle, I thank you for this. It is immediately clear that you have been preparing for the program, you have your finger on the pulse of events, because what happened in the Middle East, and Antony Blinken's calls 3 days ago, first to Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan, and then to the President of Azerbaijan the day before yesterday, also indicate that the current administration is striving to achieve success in the Middle East and the South Caucasus, as well as on the Russian-Ukrainian front. In these 2 months, they want to achieve certain results that they will be able to present to voters. Because, as you know, Joe Biden's cadence began with a shameful flight from Afghanistan, which is regularly noted by both Donald Trump personally and all Republicans. And if we start from this moment and end with the current war, almost 4 years, what is happening, with the cadence of President Biden, the current administration does not have any foreign policy successes that they could boast of, so they need a very urgent success. I think that President Zelenskyy can use this event from his point of view and his agenda, but the Americans also have the opportunity to use this visit to get a little ahead of the Republicans, especially in the undecided states, where the Ukrainian topic is now quite speculative. Recently, the media of these states have been actively discussing the Ukrainian topic, since many ethnic Ukrainians live there, and the population of these states is mainly quite loyal to Ukraine, supporting it at the level of 70 to 80%. And therefore, the position of certain candidates on this topic is very important. And if they want to win, then they must manifest themselves somehow. And the arrival of President Zelenskyy is a very profitable and convenient opportunity for this. Let's see how this will happen. I think that by our next meeting something will already be known. Mr. Yunus, I would like to dwell on the issue of permission to use Western weapons. As I understand it, this will also be the main issue that Zelenskyy will talk about with the White House, with Joe Biden. Of course, there were also former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as well as 5 other former ministers, who said that they support the ability of Ukraine and the armed forces of Ukraine to use fully weapons on the territory of the Russian Federation. But the European Parliament also voted. Resolution. Will there be a green light? What do you think? And here is one more nuance. The UK allegedly wants to allow the use of Storm Shadow, but do we need to wait for permission from the United States of America? You know, if you look at the picture over the past week, that is, since Blinken and the British Defense Secretary arrived in Kyiv, and then 2 days later Biden Starmer met here in Washington, all these conversations that you have just voiced, including statements by Boris Johnson and former British defense ministers, represent the entire political spectrum of the country. It says that the Anglo-Saxons are inclined to see the UK dominate here in this area, in long-range missiles. That is, there should not be a big difference, by and large, for Ukraine. This is Storm Shadow or ATACMS. But the main thing is that this decision is announced in the public plane. And judging by the fact that I see this information support, it is so positive. And everyone understands that this probably leads to this being announced at the meeting between Biden and President Zelenskyy. Because if this is announced at this meeting, and then there is a meeting between Kamala Harris and President Zelenskyy, where this topic will also be intensively discussed, I would be interested to see the meeting between Donald Trump and President Zelenskyy. How will he react when his journalists also ask about it, and how does he feel about it? He won't be able to say that I feel bad about it. Because if this is what President Zelenskyy asks, President Zelenskyy will meet with you. Let's see what you're going to talk about. Therefore, this is also a rather speculative topic. And since there is such information support, and quite positive, I think on the 24th we will see a lot of interesting things in the public plane. Let's wait another week. And we will talk to you next week. Mr. Yunus, of course, and the Middle East. This is what is happening now. Israel launches new strikes on Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah says that all the red lines have already been crossed. This is actually a declaration of war. And of course, let's remember pages and other household items, appliances in Lebanon that explode. What kind of operation is it? And it follows, if we are talking, I am interested in Ukraine, how this will affect Russia's war in Ukraine. Because as I understand it, the United States wants to control all escalations. And this escalation, will it affect Russia's war in Ukraine? No, this war will not have a strong impact on Russia's war in Ukraine, because it will not overflow, because it is a controlled escalation, because here first of all we need to remember the murder of Ismail Haniyeh. To this day, no one has spoken out publicly, I mean neither the United States nor Israel, on this topic. What happened to these pages? Neither the United States nor Israel spoke out on this topic. Well, of course, where does this come from? Many people can grow here, and many experts, I have no doubt, believe that this was done by these two countries, or by the special services of these countries, or by structures close to these countries that organized this. Here the question simply arises, why is this being done? And when we begin to understand that controlled escalation, the policy of the current administration, it is clearly, although it was not only the policy of the current administration, it is the policy of the United States of America. If we look at the last 30 years, I just take 30 years, without going further, the Americans have always sought to control such conflicts. There is something to be present. It also applied to Karabakh, it also applied to Abkhazia, the Skimble region, it also applied to Transnistria, it also applied to 2014, Crimea and Donbas, if you remember, because of the controlled escalation. And as a result of this, they can influence Azerbaijan, Armenia, Moldova, then Georgia from the same Russia, Moldova from the same Russia, and now Ukraine from the same Russia. Therefore, in this situation, it is exactly the same as the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It was a confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States of America, and now it has turned into a confrontation between Washington and Moscow. If Washington and Moscow had agreed, this topic would have been closed long ago. Therefore, we must understand this, where the legs of this type of problems grow from. And when you understand that, then you look at what's going on here in America, and here the president's campaign and the current administration wouldn't want to go to any of these points to overflow. As I told you, They would like to get some advantages so that this would strengthen their position in front of the voters. And the fact is that Antony Blinken has spent a lot of time in the Middle East lately, but has not achieved any success. And I think that the assassination of Ismail Khani was a message to Iran, so that those hotheads in Iran who are now in favor of escalation, so that they would understand that you are all in the crosshairs, including the spiritual leader of Iran. That is, if we can do it in the center of Tehran, in a protected area, and eliminate one of the leaders of Hamas, your guest, who came there for your inauguration. That is, this, of course, is a wake-up call. And why? Be negotiable. The same thing that is being sent to Hezbollah today. That is, be negotiable and do not interfere, because if we were able to do this, then we can do something else. And that they can do something else. Few people can say for sure today, but these capabilities that intelligence demonstrates, I recall, were used even when a key person in the nuclear program was killed thanks to robots. I'm not even talking about the case when I was in the center of Tehran. If you remember, the car was parked, and it turned out that there were no people, nothing. There was a robot with a machine gun. Everything was controlled by a satellite. The cars, when they passed, were simply shot at point-blank range. And then this car exploded. That is, to what extent modern technologies and capabilities, so to speak, of the special services in the West, which use these technologies, are much stronger than the capabilities that Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas have. Therefore, naturally, this is demonstrated, I think, this is my assumption, from the point of view that but do not escalate or go for a treaty. First of all, I mean, for sure, they mean that what happened on October 7th was a terrorist attack by Hamas against Israel, which led to thousands of civilian casualties. Because the topic of the Gaza Strip today affects the elections here in the United States and quite strengthens anti-Israeli sentiments in European countries. Therefore, there are, as here in the United States, as well as in Europe, especially in the United States, supporters of Israel, but there are a huge number of political forces that oppose this. Well, the positions of Donald Trump and Joe Biden or Kamala Harris on this issue are obvious, because Donald Trump unequivocally supports Israel, and the Democrats are trying to play in two studios, that is, both on Palestine Street and on Israel Street, but this, as you can see, fails. And, perhaps, this option, so to speak, warnings to Iran, Hezbollah and Hamas is one of the levers of influence so that, on the one hand, they do not escalate, and on the other hand, so that they quickly find some kind of consensus in these 2 months. That would allow the current administration to build on the success and claim that they have managed to resolve this situation. But given that Netanyahu, who is an ardent supporter of Donald Trump, is in Israel today, and they have bad relations with the Biden team and Biden himself, this is no secret. Netanyahu would like to keep the situation as it is, and if there is an opportunity to even escalate it a little, he would not mind, because it is this situation that gives him the opportunity to remain in his post.
Он не возражал бы, потому что именно эта ситуация дает ему возможность удерживаться пока в кресле, потому что в этой ситуации очень сложно менять премьер-министра, потому что это может привести к внутренней дестабилизации в самом Израиле, несмотря на то, что половина общества может...
In such an environment, it is very difficult to change the prime minister, as this could lead to internal destabilization in Israel. Despite the fact that half of society may oppose Netanyahu, this would be to the detriment of the country's national security. The United States understands this, and Netanyahu also plays on such subtle moments. You've seen him come to America and use the Trump factor, Congress and the Jewish lobby, the financial institutions and the media that support Israel. Thus, he puts pressure on the White House, which sends destroyers and nuclear submarines. On the other hand, the White House would like this escalation to stop, for the Israeli hostages to be released, but also for the hot phase of the confrontation to end with some kind of peace agreement, even a temporary one, while the elections are held. Well, whether it succeeds or fails, we will also see this in the next 2 months. I just want you to understand that the Americans, primarily the current administration, would not want either an escalation either on the Russian-Ukrainian front or in the Middle East. It's just that there are a certain number of countries and forces, both inside and outside the United States, that approach this in a completely different way. Any failure of the current administration in the Middle East, on the Russian-Ukrainian front or in the South Caucasus, I just outlined these 3 regions. Since you have touched on these topics, this does not play into the hands of those forces that are in one way or another interested in the success of this or that candidate in these elections. Therefore, we need to look at all this through the prism of which countries behave in this or that hotspot, and then we will understand whose side they're on in the election campaign here in the United States. Yunus, if we are talking about the third question of our block, Antony Blinken's call first to Pashinyan, and then to Azerbaijani President Aliyev. I would like to ask you, who is Andronik Tevanyan? He is the leader of the opposition bloc of Armenia, who for some damn reason came to the so-called DPR and met there, showed, and all the Russian media, the so-called, showed his visit.
Какого-то черта приехал в так называемый ДНР и там встречался, показывал, и все российские СМИ так называемые
What is it anyway?
показывали его визит. Что это такое вообще?
You know, I thank you for raising this topic, because it is very important for the Ukrainian information space to understand the attitude of this or that society, one side or another, to what is happening today on the Russian-Ukrainian front, to the tragedy of the Ukrainian people and in the situation that Ukraine and its statehood find itself. And, for example, with all the complexity of socio-political life in Azerbaijan over the past 30 years, I mean since independence, I have lived in Baku, I have worked in certain structures, as they say, of the highest and noisy authorities. I now live in America. From here I also take an active part in what is happening in my homeland. And I can tell you frankly, for all these years, especially after 2014, when the annexation of Crimea took place and the massacre in Donbas began, as well as during these 2.5 years of full-scale Russian aggression against you, I officially and publicly declare that you will not meet a single political leader in Azerbaijan, regardless of his attitude to the authorities, who would go to separatist formations like the DPR or LPR. You will not see this with regard to Abkhazia, the Skinvali region or Transnistria. No Azerbaijani political leader will go there because we have a clear position. We defend international law and we want others to proceed from this point of view and position when talking about Azerbaijan. Not only countries friendly to Azerbaijan and specifically from the post-Soviet space, including Ukraine, but also around the world. We demand this from the United States, we demand it from France, we demand it from Russia, and we demand it from the whole world. And depending on how it happens, we build our own relationships. But if we did not have such opportunities before, we were just taking our first steps, but in the 30 years of our independence and after our victory in the Second Caravan War, we have managed to make sure that the changes of Azerbaijan are already counted. But, again, I repeat, you will not meet a single political leader, deputy, artist, or any representative of Azerbaijani society who will make this type of voyage to these separatist formations and will show it, and advertise it. And this is advertised, first of all, in the Armenian media, it is emphasized in the Russian media, and it requires the attention of the Ukrainian public, because there are many crooks who sometimes manifest themselves this way and that. In these 2.5 years, I drove them out with a filthy broom in huge numbers, but sometimes some still fly in. When someone talks about these topics or comes up with anti-Azerbaijani slogans, call on them and ask the question, what is it and how can it be? On the one hand, you declare that you support Ukraine, and on the other hand, this is what is happening. And today, in parallel with this, the Azerbaijani public is drawing attention to the latest message, which you may not have noticed or heard. We are interested in this because for us relations with France are quite strained and have reached almost a low level. And we see that France, under the guise of supporting Ukraine, 70% of the weapons that it is placing today in the French defense complex, including Caesar, all the weapons that it leads to you, 30% of it will logistically pass through Ukraine towards Armenia. I have a question for all Ukrainians and all the political leadership of Ukraine, all those who are engaged in the logistics of the territory of Ukraine. Are you aware that the Azerbaijani public has questions about this? That is, I understand that at the official level, of course, this will be communicated and there will be talks. But just ask, you have a lot of journalists there who like to be interested in such issues. Ask what it is, what 30% of the weapons are, how these factories are prepared and how this part will pass through the territory of Ukraine, and how it will then end up through the territory of Ukraine in Armenia, you know. And all this despite the fact that Armenia is a member of the CSTO, a member of the Eurasian Union. I will also add here a report from American intelligence, special services, which suddenly turns out that over the past 2.5 years, two countries that have no access to the ocean have suddenly become interested in large propellers for large ships, for large tonnage ships, for warships that sail the oceans and large seas. And which these two countries, dear Igor, would be interested in. I'll tell you, these are Kyrgyzstan and Armenia. Look at the map. Do you see the ocean around these countries? I have no idea. And how do these screws suddenly pass through these countries? And then, as you understand, these propellers enter the territory of the Russian Federation. And the American intelligence services threatened about this. Naturally, this topic seems to be suppressed now. But against this background, the same Western structures turn a blind eye to the fact that today Havryshchak, Deputy Prime Minister Mishustin's deputy, Havryshchak, spoke and said that by the end of this year, the trade turnover with Armenia will reach 16 billion. I emphasize, dear Igor, 16 billion. Azerbaijan has an oil and gas market of 4 billion in total. Armenia has neither oil nor gas. Armenia, look where it is, in a dead end. And suddenly today it is already somewhere around 8-9 billion. At the moment, at the time of my conversation with you, in 2.5 years, it has reached such a level. By the end of the year, Havryshchak says, it will come to that. So you wonder what it passes through the territory of Armenia. And when it turns out that there is gold, diamonds, 90% Russian, all this, and in addition to other things, it all comes from there. A simple question, where are Western intelligence services, Brussels, Washington, Paris looking? Why don't they say anything on this topic, for example, Armenia, in this situation? Why are Ukrainians silent on this topic at all? You see, these are all questions, very important issues that need to be voiced. This is not just for you, but go, check, go, inquire. If I am not telling the truth, then you can catch me, and if it is true, then why are you silent? Why aren't you interested? And when some ship from here and here something goes or some swindler throws a narrative against Saqqara, and then it is emulated in the Ukrainian information space for several days, and today it turns out that it was a personal request of Ursula von der Leyen and a personal request of President Zelenskyy to the President of Azerbaijan. Moreover, Ukraine did not want, it wanted to close it. 2.5 years ago, I mean, pumping Russian gas through Sudra, but it was Europe that insisted and asked Ukraine not to do this. In the current situation, in which it finds itself dependent on the European Union, Ukraine was forced to take this, so to speak, a moral step, because how can it be? The occupier's gas passes through your territory, and the occupier earns money on this, and you get some money. The occupiers receive 11 billion, and you receive 1 billion a year. Austria, Slovakia, the Czech Republic receive this gas, and Austria generally receives 60% of this gas. And today, again, Realizing that this topic ends in December, they ask Azerbaijan to compensate for this gas, so that not Russian gas goes there, but Azerbaijani gas. While the negotiations are again ongoing, well, there was so much noise and garbage on this topic. Why don't you make noise? Moreover, this is a fake, this is again completely wrong information. Yes, Azerbaijan does not need it for nothing. This is a request from the European Union and Ukraine, and Azerbaijan, if it can, will help. Because Azerbaijan does not have such an amount of gas, since Azerbaijani gas has already been documented for years to come. There are agreements with 10 countries of the same European Union. There were 8, Slovakia and Croatia were added, while Italy is in first place in terms of receiving Azerbaijani gas. This is why I am saying that Azerbaijan has an excellent relationship with the European Union, a signed strategic partnership, energy security, all this is great. But if something like this happens, at least deal with it first. That's what I'm telling you. You weren't even interested, you didn't even know, so I thank you, dear, for bringing up this topic. This is very important, because when today someone starts talking about what Ukraine, Armenia is turning towards the West, I think this is what kind of insanity, what kind of fairy tales. This is for whom it is being told, this is all, because it is not going anywhere. Moreover, Pashinyan is going to this BRICS. To Kazan he is also going to go where Azerbaijan is going to go, where Turkey is going to go, that is, everyone is going there, to Kazan. The question is how he is going to turn to the West. When he has a border with Iran, the border with Turkey is guarded by Russian border guards, customs officers are standing there. When all the railways, all business is tied to Russia. And when during these 2.5 years, a golden shower falls on Pashinyan's head. Do you think that any politician in this situation, he is sitting today and for some reason he is holding on, yes, today, because he is successful from the point of view of the economy. A golden shower fell on him, and this golden shower fell 2.5 years ago. Why aren't Ukrainian economists interested in this? Go for all this money, see what goes through the territory of Russia. I have given you 2 positions, yes, these are propellers, I also called it gold. But this is not enough, in huge quantities, which in the end, it turns out, then reaches the battlefield between Russia and Ukraine, yes. And for some reason, I don't hear anything like that. First of all, I don't hear this in the West, this topic. And I don't hear this in the Ukrainian information field. This is what is an important point that I wanted to point out. Now as for why Blinken called Pashinyan and the president of Azerbaijan. The fact is that as I have already told you, they need some kind of document, some kind of success on the foreign political front. And today they very much hope that they will be able to put pressure on Azerbaijan and Armenia to sign some paper, since it will not be possible to sign a peace treaty as such, given the unconstructive position of Armenia and the tough position of Azerbaijan, which declares that they are not in a hurry, and the peace treaty should include the main points. There were 18 clauses in the peace treaty, so you know. Of these 18 points, 1 point regarding the Zangezur corridor, Azerbaijan agreed as a sacrifice of goodwill, to take as a separate case, but Azerbaijan agreed to sign these 17, agreed to sign, so what did Armenia do? A few days ago, before Antony Blinken's call, Armenia sent it to Azerbaijan and said that we are ready to sign these 13 points that we have agreed on. This is 80% of the peace treaty, and 4 points are not yet disputed. There is a provision in international practice, dear Igor, if at least 1 point, 1 position is not agreed, the entire document is not agreed, it is not accepted unequivocally. Moreover, it is necessary to ask what these points are. So these are the most important positions on which the positions of the parties do not coincide. And the very first of these positions, as you know, is that Azerbaijan demands an amendment to the constitution of Armenia, where it is clearly stated in black and white in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence of Armenia that Nagorno-Karabakh is an integral part of Armenia. Well, what normal president, politician, would sign a document with some other state, where his constitution says in black and white that part of his territory belongs to his country. And he will sign some kind of document with this state. Tomorrow, any first-year student of the Faculty of Law will go and file a complaint with the Constitutional Court of Armenia, and any constitutional court will confirm the invalidity of such a document. Does Azerbaijan need it? No. Therefore, Azerbaijan said that there will be a change in the constitution. We are ready to sign some kind of roadmap or declaration that we are moving towards a peace treaty. But if this document stipulates that Armenia undertakes to change the constitution and clearly state this and that in it, that is, Azerbaijan's claim on this matter. In addition, one of these 4 points, which is also important that Azerbaijan demands, is that Azerbaijan says, let's go to the OSCE together and abandon the OSCE Minsk group. Because the OSCE Minsk group existed for 30 years of this conflict. And sir, the conflict is over, the conflict has already ceased to be of its essence. This Minsk group included Russia, France and the United States of America. That's it, there is no more conflict, sovereignty and territorial integrity have been restored. Why are we doing this today? We should both apply to the OSCE as members of the OSCE. So Armenia refuses to do this. And do you know why? For the simple reason, they are still discussing the topic of the residents of Nagorno-Karabakh, that is, those who voluntarily left there. That is, when they say genocide, cleansing, the whole world saw it, there was no genocide, there was no ethnic cleansing. Unlike what was there 30 years ago, when almost 300,000 Azerbaijanis were expelled from Zangezur. And all this is recorded. Azerbaijan says unequivocally, if you want the Armenians to return there, be it on a parity, in a mirror manner, the Azerbaijanis must return to Zangezur. They say no, Azerbaijanis cannot return to Zangezur, this is a matter of national security of Armenia. If the return of Azerbaijanis to the territory of Armenia, to Zangezur, is a matter of national security of Armenia, then why should the return of ethnic Armenians to the territory of Azerbaijan not be a matter of national security of Azerbaijan? So they don't come, and we don't go there. Therefore, the OSCE wants to preserve the Minsk group and discusses this topic from morning to evening. I am not mentioning other aspects relating to issues that are a stumbling block. But in any case, the Americans are pressing, and if the Americans hope to put pressure on Azerbaijan, then it is useless. I have no doubt that Azerbaijan will not sign any peace treaty without taking into account these main points. First of all, instructions that Armenia should change the constitution. He announced that he would change the constitution in 2027. If you change in 2027, then the signing will be in 2027. There are simply no other options here. And if you want some kind of paper, then make sure that it is clearly spelled out in the paper. And he just doesn't go for it. Do you know why? I'll explain it to you. Azerbaijan wants to bide its time. It wants to see how the elections in the United States of America will end. Notice, yes, how the elections in the United States affect your war, the elections affect the Middle East conflict and the elections affect the relations between Azerbaijan, Armenia, and the South Caucasus. The same Pashinyan is waiting for how these elections will end, since they still have hope for the pro-Armenian government of Biden to some extent, since this is the most pro-Armenian government here in Washington. But despite this, they had to turn on their brains to understand that over these 4 years, this pro-Armenian Biden government has not achieved any anti-Azerbaijani resolution. Neither in the UN Security Council, nor through the Congress, they passed anything, nor in the European Union did they adopt anything against Azerbaijan. If you didn't succeed today, do you really think that in the next 4 years, even if Kamala Harris stays, you will succeed? This will categorically fail, and the Americans do not need this either. The same Americans, the same Democrats are putting pressure on the same Armenia, on the same Pashinyan. They say we need this Zangezur corridor, but without Russia. Russia says we need this Zangezur corridor, but without the West. We must look at this territory there. And Iran from this side says that we do not need the Zangezur corridor through the territory of Armenia at all. The Zangezur corridor should pass through the territory of Iran so that they would skim the cream. Azerbaijan is silent, because Azerbaijan is not present in this confrontation. That is, Armenia is silent because it does not know what to do. Because Russia is on the one hand, Iran is on the other. These are permanent allies who are on the ground. And they are the owners of this territory. Pashinyan cannot do anything there. And there is neither France nor the United States. Azerbaijan has solved its problem on its territory. I went to the borders. Conditional borders with Armenia. We have troops there. Azerbaijan is fully prepared along the entire perimeter of its borders, with Iran, with Russia, and from the Caspian Sea, from all sides. Our border is closed by land, so you know. Passage to Azerbaijan by air only. As you understand, it is easier to control, especially when you have such a large border with both Iran and Russia. And, on the other hand, we are standing on the border with Armenia. We no longer have the Karabakh problem, we do not have Russian so-called peacekeepers, and we do not have ethnic Armenians who could exacerbate the situation in any way from within. That is, we dragged the problem from our territory to the territory of Armenia, and today it is closed in the area of the Zangezur corridor. And there are EU monitors there, former spies and intelligence officers from several countries. There are, so to speak, the Iranians with their intelligence. There are Russian troops there. And an American military transport plane recently flew there under the guise that some kind of exercises were not conducted there in such large numbers, but they are advisors, they stayed there, they did not go anywhere, and some of the weapons remained there. It's like a powder keg. You know, in this situation, he says that, well, I will drag it out, so he sends this to Azerbaijan, removes 4 points, realizing that Azerbaijan will not sign. And he says, we are ready to sign, but Azerbaijan, as you can see, does not want to sign. So you decipher, yes, why Azerbaijan does not want to sign. Because you removed 4 points from there, and the main one is a change in the constitution. And do you want Azerbaijan to sign such a document? Moreover, they raise the topic today at all sorts of international venues. First of all, this is done by this Samantha Power, a corrupt official. Samantha Power should be sitting there next to Menendez. Menendez is now on trial, and soon Samantha Power, who received a bribe of $1 million from Ruben Vardanyan under the guise of some kind of prize within the framework of the Aurora, where she sits on the committee, will also be tried. And now this very anti-Power, who allegedly tears his shirt for Ukraine in the Ukrainian information field, is nominating Vardanyan for the Nobel Peace Prize, a man who is up to his elbows in blood, who participated in the massacre in Donbas and laundered money in this region, making his capital in Donbas since 2014. It was the purse of the same Kremlin, and everyone knows it, and they know it in America, and they know it in France, they know it all over the world. I'm just wondering if Ukraine knows about it or not. When Samantha Power herself comes to you, also to have this conversation with her, and ask, yes, why the hell are you nominating this crook, the enemy of Ukraine, for the Nobel Prize today? No one will give him the Nobel Prize, because he is in prison today in Azerbaijan, and the cases have already been submitted to court, and soon there will be a trial of several former so-called presidents, prime ministers, defense ministers, foreign ministers, that's what they call themselves, including Vardanyan. The Nuremberg trials will take place, as it was in the days of Nazi Germany, and so will the Nuremberg trials. And they are now putting pressure on Azerbaijan that COP29 will begin in Azerbaijan in 2 months. This World Climate Conference under the auspices of the UN, from November 10 to 23. And they want to have some kind of paper between Azerbaijan and Armenia by this time. And maybe these crooks would also be released from there. You can be sure, dear Igor, that no lever of influence on Azerbaijan is working today, because both the political situation is on the side of Azerbaijan, and most importantly, the Achilles heel that we had, it was torn out from behind the knives. Why are you being influenced? Because part of your territory is occupied. Because you depend largely on this West, both financially and in military technical terms as well. Azerbaijan does not have this dependence today. Azerbaijan is self-sufficient. Azerbaijan has a positive balance. Azerbaijan is a fairly good financial safety cushion. Thank Allah, we have both oil and gas. Azerbaijan has built its foreign policy over the past 20 years in such a way that we have been able to create one of the strongest armies in this region. Next to us is the second NATO army, as well as nuclear Pakistan. If necessary, we have nuclear weapons, a second army, as well as all the military technical equipment, which is the best in the world. And some of them, the best, are in Israel, Azerbaijan. Let me remind you that when Iranian troops gathered on the border of Azerbaijan, they threatened Azerbaijan if Azerbaijan did something wrong. And what did the president of Azerbaijan do? He took an Israeli drone, sat right on the border to be photographed, hugged this drone, and so far everyone saw that it was made in Israel. That is, once again you threaten someone. If you threaten Azerbaijan, you know, Azerbaijan has countries. Note that when I named these countries, there was no United States, there was no France, there were no other countries, NATO and the European Union. And which countries will fit in for the same Armenia in the current situation? I don't see a single country. I see, first of all, that of these countries that really want to play there today, too can really punish Armenia. First of all, this is Russia, in second place is Iran. And that's why today, You see how they put pressure on Armenia, and that's why Pashinyan, like a darling, is flying to Kazan today, and someone in the information field of Ukraine or somewhere in the West wants to present that Armenia has taken a course to the West. And how can it head west? Look at the ground. Look at the situation in Georgia, for example. Georgia at least has access to the Black Sea. And despite the fact that Georgia has reached the Black Sea, look at who is Georgia in strategic partnership with. With Turkey, with Azerbaijan. And this is much more important. This is a strategic partnership with Azerbaijan than with France or the United States of America. Because they are far away. Yes, the European Union is good for Georgia, it is the Black Sea and access there. And this is beneficial for both Azerbaijan and Turkey. But, definitely, on the ground here, Georgia neighbors Azerbaijan and Turkey, so it uses this. Armenia today is in hostile relations with both Azerbaijan and Turkey. The border is closed. Azerbaijan is at an impasse. There is no France, there is no United States, there is no France, there is no United States of America, there is Russia, which has not yet been called at all. America, there is Russia, whose name has not yet been taken care of at all. And when I regularly speak on the air, and they always listen to me in Armenia, they listen very much, not even liking to listen to me, from morning to evening. And it is very important for me to convey these messages to them. Have you forgotten what coup attempts you had? Because Pashinyan knows that when he makes an extra body movement, a coup occurs, something that has happened several times. They have already had 2 coups, and they had a shootout in parliament as a result of this. This was the second coup, and he also understands why he, for example, does not go for something himself. It is easier for him to get hit on the head with a truncheon, as it happened in the 44th Day War, during these 4 years after that. What did he say then? Well, you see, I did nothing against our interests, but this is Azerbaijan. It turns out that it is more profitable for him when you hit him in the brain with a whip. And that's why he doesn't do anything now. He thinks that if he goes, for example, to change the constitution, then there will be those who come to Lugansk inside, such crooks who will start saying that he is selling national interests. The church will become Armenian, then the diaspora in Europe and the United States also understands this. Therefore, he decides, I will not do anything, let everything go as it goes, let's see how everything ends before the end of the year. This is an explosive situation in Armenia. Azerbaijan is in no hurry. If Armenia is biding its time, then we are not in a hurry at all. We have done everything, and the Americans are pressing, because there are 2 months left, and they need some paper. I have drawn all this for you in general terms, and I started with people taking a close interest in it, because all this, in one way or another, attracts the United States of America, the current administration. And they are no less active with us, just as they are with you. It's just that our topic, perhaps, has moved a little away from the active military phase, but these same people are there all day. I will tell you further. Here is a small nuance. The day before yesterday, Richard Noor, the director of MI6, was in Baku. Such people don't just ride. This is the one who met Burns recently. He came to Baku. Yes, he spoke publicly and officially at the Azerbaijan Diplomatic Academy, gave a lecture where all respected experts, political scientists, politicians from all over the world meet. The president of Azerbaijan regularly gathers them there and meets. But this is for a reason. And if you remember that a few days before him, Burns' deputy arrived, military intelligence, who is the head of military intelligence, also came to Baku. Wonder what it is all of a sudden, that they suddenly became frequent there. And I am not talking about the fact that Shoigu came before that, and the fact that after that the president of Russia also came. This is the importance of Azerbaijan, this geography, this territory, all these processes that are taking place. There is Iran, you see, and there is the Middle East. And there is a lot of this, which, in one way or another, as you ask me, affects the Ukrainian theme. Unambiguously. Because all these players involved on the Ukrainian front, they are also involved here, in the South Caucasus. They are also all involved in the Middle East. Understand? Therefore, it is very important where they can agree and where they do not. In the same way, compared to Russia, Russian-Turkish relations. They're the same, you'll notice, right? In Syria, they are still temporary, but they have very irreconcilable relations there, especially in the Idlib area. Look at their relations in Libya as well. But where they can agree, they agree. There is still a lull here, they are not temporarily escalating this situation. But this is an unnegotiated territory for them, and they never agree on Libya or Syria. Russia and Turkey will not be able to agree unequivocally here. or someone has to give in this situation. Therefore, the same thing is happening in those territories in the South Caucasus, in the Middle East, and in the Russian-Ukrainian. They can agree in one place, and in another place they can butt heads. Therefore, these are all interrelated processes in the context of this turbulence, in the context of a change in this geopolitical paradigm. It is just very important to always keep this topic on the surface, always be interested in it. And therefore, dear Igor, I thank you for regularly keeping this topic in our conversations. This is very important for your professional work as a journalist and for the Ukrainian information space, so that Ukrainians do not become hostages of certain narratives. For example, if many people may not like that I am criticizing Armenia, or someone may be a supporter of Armenia or France, I urge you to do your research, address this issue and see if Ramiz Yunus is telling the truth about the propellers that are on Russian warships. Gold, which diamonds, 90% pass through the territory of Armenia. The trade turnover between Armenia and Russia has tripled. You will be interested, right? This is all. If this is true, a simple question, why aren't you interested? Isn't this against Ukraine? Mr. Yunus, thank you very much. In the modern world, there are no separate issues, they are all interconnected, and we are talking about this. In all three areas that we have mentioned today, there are interests of the United States of America, the South Caucasus and the Middle East. We will continue to discuss these topics, and thank you so much for explaining nuances that are not obvious and sharing what remains unknown to our viewers. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. A political scientist from the United States of America, Ramiz Yunus, was with us. Of course, put your likes, comment and share our conversations. My name is Ihor Havryshchak. We will see you on the air of Channel 24.